For those who have stepped forth into the enigmatic and complicated world of UFO research, they know that it is rife with division. But here, just like religion, we have another reason for the numerous splits, as the enigma really comes down to the individual human experience. The need for understanding our purpose and place among the planets and stars gave rise to religion from the very earliest of times. It is really no different today. In many cases, this need has been skewed to create a persuasion eliciting power and control, or at the very least, an audience. From Christianity to Scientology, the need and purpose are still being fed. In the case of the UFO, we simply need to look to the Raelian movement and the beliefs of the adherents of David Icke, Eric von Däniken, and Zecharia Sitchin, for example, to see this principle in action. There are many people who have claimed that they have been visited by aliens or beings from other dimensions. Some of these individuals understand that the visit may not be one based in physical reality, but they are the minority. The vast majority, like people who see ghosts and apparitions, believe in the data from experiences they encountered with their very own eyes. And why shouldn't they? One reason could be that many times these visions don't in fact come from the eyes at all, but from within the mind. It is often assumed the experiences are a visual representation of something on the physical plane. Experience, then, is a catalyst to religion and belief. We believe that what we have seen has external truth, and therefore we move on and develop ways to explain and interpret it. Often this develops into cults and religious structures, and from there into intolerance, a seemingly natural process elicited by humans for millennia. From the very first shaman who dwelled in a cave and induced an altered state with some peculiar plant or root, he has been able to see all manner of weird and wonderful things in realms much stranger than our own. The shaman believed what he saw. He had no classical reference, no scientific reasoning of our modern times. But still today, people believe what they see via experiences, which do not necessarily differ from the visions of the shaman. These beliefs are strong and willful, but we have to think the unthinkable and step outside any comfortable paradigms if we are to get to the truth, as there may yet be a fantastic and incredible explanation. How many of us can say that we have studied the human mind? How many have spent years truly delving into the history of these experiences? How many have grasped the truths of alchemy, Gnosticism, philosophy, and the world of the esoteric? Not many. Even Eliphas Levi, the author of Transcendental Magic, Its Doctrine and Ritual, was not an actual practitioner of the occult, and certainly a very small percentage of those who cling to physical realities for the tricks our evolutionary mind plays upon us have truly undergone any extensive research of their own. It is true, however, to note that once having an experience, many people embark on a vision quest, spending their energy and resources as well as their hard-earned money along the way. They eventually come to terms with these experiences one way or another. A negative impact occurs when an experiencer plays upon this element of the human nature and creates new realities and explanations, often placing themselves as a new Messiah figure. Some such figures tell us that we need to be free, to escape the chains of a society created and manipulated by the Illuminati or the shapeshifters, and then place themselves before us as the sacrificial lamb who will lead us into freedom. They are in fact setting themselves up as a new religious leader, manipulating the minds of potential followers, giving them explanations that somehow make sense to many less confident individuals in search of purpose and direction. Instead of suggesting that people think for themselves and find their own personal truths, they blaze a trail of publicity and make fortunes out of lies and deceit, while swelling the ranks of their followers who eventually lose all sense of self. No one can deny the facts of history, that secret societies have often taken hold of power and formed new nations. The Freemasons, the Jesuits, even the Illuminati have all been implicated in the struggle for power from those who went before. But to say these men are there because of their connection to otherworldly beings or aliens, even that they sacrificed children to Lucifer, is stretching the imagination. All men are capable of all things. Every man, woman, and child is a star. These are tenets rarely found in essays about Aleister Crowley, the great beast. But they are there. And without doubt, Crowley himself was striving to achieve his own personal true will and evolution above and beyond all else that he is known for. Perhaps these tenets are the very reason people in positions of power will do almost anything to maintain that power and increase it. In fact, they will also steer their disciples away from themselves and the notion that they too can become empowered in their own right. These efforts may indeed involve creating or continuing age-old rituals and systems that appear strange to us today. Regardless, the truth points back to the manipulation of the mind. The fact is that psychologically uneducated masses do and will believe in all manner of phenomena, and this human tendency has been used and abused by those in power for millennia. It began with natural forces, then various deities and idols, and today we are fed paranormal and otherworldly tricksters via the beacon of a one-eyed monster called the television. Before mass media, strange experiences were classified as religious or spiritual experiences. Today we are being led into alien, even quantum explanations for a phenomena that knows no limits or boundaries. Today we watch the TV screen and see the exploits of Mulder and Scully on the X-Files, and more recently in the past several years, a wide variety of other weird and wonderful entertainment programs. Today, as a partial side effect, our experiences flow out as aliens, UFOs, spirits, and even interdimensional realities. The only thing that has changed in all these thousands of years is the explanation for the experience. The only thing that has remained is the experience itself, yet we have no true foundation from which to attempt to understand it. And so our search needs to focus on the experience itself and not on the many faceted explanations that have developed over time. Having said that, we in no way shall discount any of the explanations that man has derived over the years. Instead, we are simply stating that due to the evidence we presently have, the only truth that we can still rely upon is the experience. We must wipe the slate clean and revisit this quandary now in perfect neutrality. If, after all this, we find evidence for ghosts, spirits, interdimensional beings, and even aliens, then so be it. We have done the task in truth and honesty.
A goon of terror.
So what is this experience? It arises from the connecting point between the conscious mind, which struggles diligently to comprehend everything around it, and the unconscious mind, which absorbs, reacts, and controls our unconscious actions, such as breathing. The unconscious mind remains a mystery, because we are simply not conscious of it. We must imagine what it is like inside this huge domain on the other side of our daily realities. And yet, within this other world there lies a whole lifetime of information, input, and experience, a great deal of which we are not even aware of, nor do we remember consciously. All the information we have ever been subjected to and more is hidden away in this remarkable realm. Occasionally, people recall their encounters in this strange world in dreams, and more interestingly, lucid dreams, whereby we become conscious of elements of our unconscious world and even interact with them. The shaman, medicine men, and often priests and mystics of our past have found portals into this world, reporting their findings as if it had some physical or external reality. Using drugs, dance, meditation, prayer, isolation, and even pain, these chosen people would wander in and out of this other world at will, often motivated to do so on behalf of their people, for healing, prophecy, and all manner of other reasons. This was the place of the deities or aliens, where archetypal knowledge has been passed on since the beginning of creation. The truth is that within each and every one of us there is a central core. From this core comes the archetypal knowledge, things that strike a chord or resonate with our central nervous system at our very being. This core has been built over vast periods of time, absorbing information at the base DNA level in order for us to survive and improve as a species. However, it is not just the shaman who can delve into the unconscious world. We too are constantly popping in and out with every second of our lives unknowingly. In fact, there is more information and stimulus affecting human society than ever before, much of it deemed useless. Perhaps this bombardment is having a counterproductive result on our species, as we manufacture more and more chemically derived compounds to help us cope with stress, anxiety, and obesity. Perhaps not all, but many of the experiences that are explained as ghostly visitations or alien abductions can now be seen to have emerged from this other world within our minds. We discover that often these experiences happen in bed or in the near sleep state, where a unique effect called sleep paralysis occurs. This is where our muscles fail to function, and so we believe we are tied or frozen in place. Even though this is a very real limitation imposed on the experiencer, it's not clear whether the individual is physically handicapped. However, there are ardent believers who will state the fact that not all visions occur in the sleep or near sleep states, and that many occur while the individual is wide awake. This is a very relevant point, but we must also consider that the mind is constantly going in and out of this other world of the unconscious. With every millisecond, we are all in essence a wave of energy, resonating in and out of consciousness and unconsciousness. We can be wide awake and an experience can slip into our unconscious mind, whether spontaneously or via suggestion, perhaps via the preaching of a pastor, or a lecture of a paranormal expert, or a film or television program. Suggestion is subtle and can be a very tricky thing.
have a static, intermittent static. I've got a little bit of a steady tone. I don't guess I hear that.
Of course, it may very well be that our unconscious world is as real as our conscious world. But this can be a circular argument and is best left to philosophical debate. In this film, we are looking specifically at real physical realities and the possible misinterpretation that our minds can project upon ourselves and others. The truth is that if we come to this concept with perfect neutrality, then we have to take this alternative argument into consideration. We must first accept that the experience has been around since the beginning of man, and so he either became aware of the intrusion of ghosts, spirits, aliens, and other worldly beings, or these things are creations formed because of the clash of consciousness and unconsciousness. There may, of course, be a middle ground, a third state that explains much more. One of the archetypal attributes that is very often seen or sensed in altered states of consciousness is the waveform, or as some people believe, DNA. This waveform is the basis of all life, for without the wave there can be no duality, no positive or negative, no yin or yang. The two are truly one. This is archetypal, seen by all because it is within all. Over the thousands of years of man's delving into the mind or other world, he has used his imagination to fashion the eternal waveform into a physical, external symbol on earth, the snake. It became the serpent of wisdom because it brought back with it wisdom from within, the voice of the deities residing within ourselves. This is a vision back in time so far that it staggers the mind. It is a vision into the power that gave rise to the Big Bang itself, the pure energy of the cosmos that enables life as we know it. Other archetypal imagery exists that we are all familiar with and is perfectly in line with evolution and our own growth and survival. For instance, the classical image of the alien is two large eyes set upon an oval face, mostly without color. It is theorized that when a child is born, he or she is set by evolution to search for its mother's face. At this stage, the baby is not geared to recognize color or even hair, and so looks for an odd-shaped head with two large eyes. When we go into the world below our conscious awareness, we see back in time and into our evolutionary instincts, our archetypal world, our real selves. And so using modern concepts that have influenced us, these shapes are given a new name, alien or gray, for example. This does not explain all alien encounters by any means. Indeed, sightings by pilots, officials, and other very credible eyewitnesses abound. But it does explain a great many, and it is no stretch to envision other archetypal images and their earthly associations that we may have also developed and modified over the ages.
The hatch is coming open.
So even with this small example, we can see that there are fascinating alternative reasons for some of the experiences we have. Sleep paralysis, serpent or reptilian forms, grays, beings of light, various emotions, and even time dilation can find explanation in the root of our present-day consciousness. The zone between the waking and non-waking world has long been used to delude and confuse us, exposing those who would manipulate us by stretching our imaginations for their own ends. We are left with a feeling of emptiness. Because of this activity, many will retreat back from rational explanations based in the science of the mind and cling to their own experiences as real, even though they very well might not be.
That isn't collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up.
We are drugged both literally and psychologically by the society we allow around us. Is it time to rehabilitate and take a giant step back from what we have become accustomed to? Do we need to reevaluate the world we are told exists and do ourselves a favor? Learn from nature and our place in it. Nature is full of wonder and mystery, and yet we have lost all sense of connection with it. Perhaps returning to the Garden of Eden is precisely what the earth needs us to do for its future. We have filled in the gaps of our forgotten knowledge with the power of imagination, and in doing so we may have deluded ourselves yet again. But worse than this, we have opened up a gateway for others to capitalize and control us, revealing our own lack of knowledge. Whilst we stand in awe of the fabulous tales of reptilian shapeshifters and ancient astronauts, we are gullible to the ramblings of those that would be our new messiahs. The same is true if we stand in awe of the scientist who would have us build with asbestos, or the medical industry that prescribes chemical compounds such as Ritalin to solve the problems of adolescent America. It does not matter from what quarter the delusion stems from. These underlying falsehoods abound in our modern cultures on a minute-to-minute basis. So we must not only test but push the limits and boundaries of our daily lives to reevaluate what we previously perceived as true. As we relearn to view the most basic things around us from a neutral standpoint, we can find the truth of all things for ourselves, independent of the cacophonous world outside. Regardless of all conjecture, it is clear from our ancestors and ancient cultures in every part of the world that the other world, on the other side of our everyday realities, is just as important as our day-to-day modality. Perhaps some UFOs are real, others something different than otherworldly visitors completely. What are the UFOs? If we remain neutral, then we avoid excluding any possibilities that have yet to emerge in our conscious and unconscious minds. We avoid putting ourselves into any framed paradigm, as in the case of science and logic. Perhaps we need to abandon any previous notions or ideas about this phenomenon to gain headway into the unknown. Are they emanating from ourselves? Are they here only because we have the capacity to perceive them? Perhaps they are ancient archetypes that we have forgotten within the sands of time. Whatever they are very real to the experiencer. They are real to countless thousands who encounter them more and more each year as the sightings continue to multiply. What are they trying to tell us? If we can understand the UFOs, perhaps we can better understand ourselves. Nick Pope is one man who has spent a great deal of time with a vast insider knowledge on the subject. Having worked as a special UFO investigator for the British Ministry of Defense, he has been privy to many sightings from individuals around the world. What conclusions has he come to? Now, the real Fox Mulder is free of the demands placed upon him by government. What are his opinions on ancient astronauts, black technology, and the psychology of beliefs in UFOs? And last, but not least, aliens.
What is your concept and your thoughts on ancient astronauts?
I'm not a great believer in it. I think had we been visited by extraterrestrials who came to us as gods, I think there would be something tangible left in terms of not just evidence but proof, and I think it's important to differentiate those two concepts. Now I can almost hear people shouting, but there is proof! You know, what about the pyramids? And this is where I have a particular beef. There's a sort of implicit racism that creeps into some of this, I think, and it's slightly distasteful. It's the idea that these ignorant, primitive savages couldn't possibly have built something like the pyramids or constructed the Nazca lines or built this temple because they were stupid. Yes. And actually, A, that's wrong, and B, with something like the pyramids, it simply doesn't grip the fundamental concept of how much of the total effort of the entire state was configured on constructing these things, in terms of both the sheer numbers but also the most brilliant scientific minds in terms of people with knowledge of geometry through astronomy and things like that. So I think a lot of this idea, it's the wrong way round. People come to it by saying these are primitive ancestors, which is a phrase that I don't like anyway. Yes. Our primitive ancestors couldn't possibly have constructed the pyramids. Therefore, somebody else must have done. Who could that be, or who could have helped them? And that's where people. So I don't think it starts with a belief that we've been visited by the stars. It's the other way around, and it's based on a fallacy. Yeah.
For those who have stepped forth into the enigmatic and complicated world of UFO research, they know that it is rife with division. But here, just like religion, we have another reason for the numerous splits, as the enigma really comes down to the individual human experience. The need for understanding our purpose and place among the planets and stars gave rise to religion from the very earliest of times. It is really no different today. In many cases, this need has been skewed to create a persuasion eliciting power and control, or at the very least, an audience. From Christianity to Scientology, the need and purpose are still being fed. In the case of the UFO, we simply need to look to the Raelian movement and the beliefs of the adherents of David Icke, Eric von Däniken, and Zecharia Sitchin, for example, to see this principle.
The pompic imagery and the particular state, the waking state and the sleeping state, and the borderline between the two, whether it's waking up or going to sleep. Let's take the person who in that scenario sees or perceives, actually an important distinction, a shadowy figure at the foot of the bed. Invariably, through a combination of that person's knowledge, their culture and their belief system, they are going to put an interpretation on the experience they believe they've had. And even if it's quite amorphous, and even if it didn't actually happen at all, it will, almost like getting into the whole quantum thing, that it will collapse into a reality that has a direct relationship with that person's, with the witness's knowledge and culture and belief system. So the religious person may see an angel or a manifestation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The ghost hunter will see a ghost. The ufologist will see an alien. I certainly acknowledge that, and certainly the power of belief, the power of faith, whether it's belief in God or whether it's belief in extraterrestrials, is going to play a part in the experience that you have. A lot of abduction experiences take place in the window where hypnagogic, hypnopompic imagery may be a factor, or in activities where you might get into that state. That does not mean that those experiences did involve hypnagogic, hypnopompic imagery.
You have to be for a split second for it to enter the consciousness.
Oh yeah, but just because you have an experience, I believe you have an experience whilst you're waking up, yes, you can say, well, that's exactly where you would get. Doesn't mean it was.
No.
But then we really are going back to this fundamental question about what is reality. I remember Ralph Noyce, who of course used to work at the Ministry of Defence, was involved in the UFO project for a while, went on to be honorary secretary, I think, of one of the crop circle groups, was also heavily involved with the Society for Psychical Research. I remember once he was getting so exasperated over this sort of discussion that we're having, that he said, look, can we just dispense with the word real? But he had a point, and of course there's that wonderful scene in George Orwell's classic book 1984 where in the interrogation scene O'Brien says to Winston Smith, if I say that I'm floating above the ground and I believe I am, and simultaneously you believe that I am, then I am.
Yes.
Even if I'm not.
Yes.
one came back alive. It's where everyone goes. But given of terror. Lost in the night. These 6 people murdered a belated terrorist. They'll chop your heads off.
When somebody says, I've had an abduction experience, even if it doesn't take place in what you might call, say, the physically observable universe, does it nonetheless invalidate the experience? No, I don't think it does. Does it mean that the experience was something else other than physical? Might these people be undergoing a genuine phenomenon, but not one that involves being taken on board to a spaceship by aliens?
I don't actually think it's a modern phenomenon either, because when you look back through history, you find many great mystics, these same people who have what's known as the mystical experience, which is the point we're talking about between consciousness and unconsciousness, that they have this connection to the divine or to whatever else it was, that they are taking up to the 7 levels of heaven, that they are taking away to special caves, etc., etc.
Oh, the links between folklore and the modern abduction phenomenon are very, very clear, and particularly the researcher Jacques Vallée did a lot of work into that, and looking at particularly the sort of fairy lore, as it were, right down to the similarities, say, between the concept of a changeling and the modern human-alien hybrid stories. Again, the idea of babies being at the heart of this, and indeed the concept of time working in a very different way. I mean, now the number of stories, both from the fairy lore, but also the classic stories like Rip Van Winkle. And when I woke, I found that though to me it had only been a day, I had been gone for 40 years. Exactly, and you find that, I mean, for goodness sake, it's even called missing time in relation to the modern alien abduction phenomenon. And people say, well, I had driven back a road that I'm very familiar with, and when I got back, my wife was distraught and said, where have you been? And I looked at the clock, and to my amazement, a journey which I travel every day and takes me 20 minutes had taken me 3 hours. Well, direct parallel with all these sort of Rip Van Winkle stories.
The point I'm trying to get around to is that it's something that it's a modern phenomenon, yes, but it's also an ancient one. It's basically a human phenomenon that we're talking about it. So it's real, it happens to people. It seems to be very, very close to the mystical experience.
And it's interpreted according to the contemporary culture.
Absolutely.
Experiments of Clancy and McNally were quite telling, because they got a group of abductees, a control group of non-abductees, and in a double-blind environment got the abductees to recall their stories, and they had them wired up and they were monitoring things like heart rate, perspiration levels. whilst recalling their experiences, the abductees displayed physiological reactions in terms of increased heartbeat and perspiration that the control group didn't get when asked to put themselves in the same position and recount similarly unpleasant first-person experiences.
So they believed the experience.
They believed, yes, and that's critical. And the interesting thing is that because they're skeptics, McNally and Clancy have been attacked by the UFO lobby, and yet actually they've probably done more of a service in proving the reality in some sense of the phenomenon than any of the believers. It's just that the reality that they believe in is not necessarily these people were on a spaceship.
Yes.
But I don't think McNally and Clancy, and I mustn't put words into their mouths, but I don't think they would dispute that the abductees genuinely believe they've had these experiences. Now, if they believe they've had these experiences, why? What's the stimulus? What's the root cause of such a strong belief?
So far, in all these years, nobody has said, here's the ship, here's an alien.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen hard physical evidence that I would be looking for as an archaeologist in the field.
No.
You know, I mean, I've been on plenty of archaeological digs, I've been into tombs, I've done all the other things. I can see something real, I can carbon date it, I can, analyse it against other classical literature, etc. I have no physical UFO in my head.
No. Religious people have no physical proof.
No, I'm not religious.
I'm just making the interesting analogy. And yet in America, we have "In God We Trust" written on the currency, and here we have the Church of England as an official state religion, integrated into the fabric of our society, not actually evidence-based at all. I would argue, but belief-based.
I would agree entirely.
In fact, I would argue that in terms of some of the data, photographs, videos, radar tapes, eyewitness testimony from pilots, and eyewitness testimony is evidence. I mean, any police officer will tell you that. I mean, there are degrees of, you might say that eyewitness testimony alone is not going to constitute proof, but it's certainly admissible evidence.
So the point you're making is that the Gospels that we have are 300 years after Christ, written by people who never even saw him, and yet we believe them.
Well,
we have texts.
Some do.
Some people believe them, yes. We have texts today from the actual eyewitnesses, and footage and photographs of various things, and yet we don't believe them.
Well, I think that's an overgeneralisation, because you could probably point to an awful lot of people who think religion's all stuff and nonsense.
Yes.
I'd be interested to see a really serious poll comparing and contrasting religious belief with, say, paranormal
It's
belief.
like kind of when people come to one of the conferences, you always used to say, hands up who's ever seen a UFO. And not very many people would do it. And yet, if you got them all to sign a form, what religion are you? They'd all put Church of England.
Yeah. But if I said to them, hands up, which of you people who've just put down C of E have ever seen God?
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if even one hand went up. I think the problem is it's the signal to noise ratio. You say you want the truth. Well, A, whose truth? And B, how the heck do you actually go about trying to find it?
Do you think that anywhere in the world there are any governments which do actually hold any UFO?
My honest answer is I don't know. My speculative answer is that if there is one, I think it can only be one, and it can only be America. And it can only be America.
Relates for me to the ancient asteroid also, to the psychology, and that is the fairly modern phenomenon of indigo children or star children. Do you have any thoughts, comments on that?
Where to start on this one? Now, again, you can say that indigo children and star children is just the latest, I was going to say incarnation, but it's a word with connotations itself in this field. It's just another version of, say, the idea of a human-alien hybrid, which is in itself just another variation on the sort of fairy lore concept of maybe a changeling. Not that these things are necessarily exactly the same, but there are links between them all. There are links between people who claim that during an abduction experience they've undergone some sort of learning experience. Whitley Strieber talked about the secret school. Many abductees talk about being shown imagery on screens or having helmets put on, being given knowledge of free energy systems, cancer cures.
This is no different to the ancient gnosis. This is the mystical experience. I come away with a sense of knowledge. I come away with information. The shaman going on his journey in times past and coming back with knowledge for the tribe, etc.
Yes.
All of that's relates, sure.
This is going to not go down well with a lot of the New Age community, but again, I hear it so many times, and sometimes with these star children, the indigo children, I think actually what you've got is what I would call good old-fashioned parental pride. The number of times you hear somebody saying, "My kid is so bright, he's coming out with things, age 2, I don't see where he's getting it from." And
so you don't think there's a shift in evolution, that our children are now being, evolving into something special because of alien genetics?
Well, this is we're doing this interview in the week where the government said we need 13,000 new maths champions because kids can't do basic arithmetic. I mean, if we are being ushered into a new age with a bright bunch of kids with all sorts of skills and attitudes, they obviously can't do their sort of 4 times table yet. Look how many parents live vicariously through their children. Look at all those reality TV shows where, say, the mother, who didn't quite make it as an actress, puts this poor, terrified little kid up in front of Sharon Osbourne and Simon Cowell and whatever, and we live in an era where we're obsessed by celebrity. We live in an era where everyone wants a route out of their ordinary lives, and people want a quick fix these days. I mean, the idea of learning a trade from your father or doing a 5-year apprenticeship's gone out of the window. People now want to go on Big Brother and become a celebrity overnight. Sadly, I see evidence of a government that's having to bring in all these extra teachers because people can't do basic arithmetic. I see evidence of antisocial behaviour spiralling out of control. I don't see evidence of the Indigo kids leading us into the age of Aquarius. I'm sorry, I'd like to, but I don't.
Safety systems armed. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Endeavour, going where east and west do meet at the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling.
Houston Endeavour, roll program.
3 hydraulic systems in good shape, as are the electricity producing fuel cells.
Guys getting the image?
Franklin, we see a long line, a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
Main engines at 104% of rated thrust. Coming up on staging, the burnout of these twin solid rocket boosters at 2 minutes 5 seconds. SRB separation confirmed.
Ahí van. 3, 4, 5, 6. ¿Con 6?
¿Abajo o arriba o arriba?
En medio, ahí van. A la misma altura.
I'm told that many astronauts are coming back down to Earth and saying that they are seeing UFOs, or that they are having experiences in space. Other people are telling me that NASA themselves may be covering up images of pulled transmission of various things, and there is a reason why we have not been back to the moon. What's your idea about these various concepts?
Right. In a literal dictionary definition sense, yes, many of the astronauts have seen UFOs. Actually, though, this is where the problem is in our language, that with a sizable number of people, the term UFO has erroneously become synonymous with alien spacecraft, whereas in fact it simply means what it says on the tin. Now there's a lot of space debris up there, and when you follow up these questions about, well, yeah, what was this thing that you saw? It transpires, well, we think it might have been a bit of the booster rocket, or, well, you know, something may have broken off one of the heat-resistant tiles. I mean, a classic example just this week with the space shuttle, where the headline said something like, "Space shuttle hit by UFO," but when you actually read the story, it was talking about something maybe a foot and a half across, which it seemed clear had broken off either the International Space Station or the shuttle and dented part of the craft. Now, no one was really implying that there was this foot-long alien spacecraft.
Many people are implying things. We can all go on YouTube and see these things darting around all over the place, across the Earth, and people saying that these are strange snake beings in the atmosphere.
Yes,
all kinds of different things.
I mean, first point, a lot of the stuff on YouTube is CGI.
Yeah.
Second point, even where stuff is actually the real footage and its provenance when investigated, and that's an important phrase, when investigated, because none of this should be taken at first value, but checks out, actually is attributable to quite mundane things. I mean, the classic one that's put forward is, well, you see this object and it's moving in one direction and then it suddenly changes its direction, and that must prove that it's under intelligent control. Well, actually, no. All it actually proves is that some other force or object may have started acting on it. It may have collided with another. It may have been an ice crystal colliding with another ice crystal. The honest answer is we don't know. Now, as to this business of why we haven't been back to the moon, A, because it's actually quite difficult, B, it's quite dangerous, C, it's quite expensive, D, I think after half a dozen missions, they realised that, okay, it's great, but it is just basically a pile of rocks. And where are we up to? F. Or, actually we've got bigger targets now, more ambitious targets. We'd like to put a human being on Mars. Love there to be aliens, and if they had the slightest whisper of this, they would shout it from the rooftops, because their budget would go through the roof. Now, for proof of that, look how quick they were to talk about life on Mars in a situation actually where much of the mainstream scientific community accused NASA of being far too hasty.
If NASA are really keen for people to actually be interested in there being life out there, could there not be also disinformation going out, which is not necessarily to stop us from believing that aliens exist, but to make us believe that aliens exist and we've visited the planet?
Yes, I mean, there is certainly the theory that much of science fiction is part of a government campaign to acclimatise us to the reality of an extraterrestrial presence.
Is that true, do you think?
No, I don't think so. Because it goes back to what I know about news management. If you're going to push a message, you push a consistent message. Actually, if this was an acclimatisation process, it's the most bizarrely wrong-headed campaign.
The Nazis during the Second World War had this fantastic flying saucer.
Well, did they?
Supposedly.
No, you see, this is where I come back. Look, World War II was total war. And the one thing we knew about the Nazis, particularly in the last days, is that anything that they had, they would use. If they really had operational disc-shaped craft capable of the sorts of properties attributed to them, they would have been used.
If they got them working.
If they got them working,
this
yeah.
looks like
So,
incredibly unstable designs.
and it is an inherent. A disc-shaped craft is inherently unstable. I think that many of these so-called Nazi flying saucers didn't get any further than the drawing board. It's one thing to build a model. It's one thing to even design one. It's quite another thing to get it to fly, and get it to fly in a way where it could go up against hurricanes and Spitfires and things, and you know, I don't think they'd got that far. If they had have done, they would have done it.
But in the 1940s, they had concepts of a circular ship, circular flying ship. Concepts, but that's 60 years ago.
Yeah.
In 60 years, maybe these Nazi rocket scientists that the US and the British took after the Second World War, maybe they have taken that much further, and that we have taken it further.
Well, again, yes, but of course, if you look at the shape of most UFOs that people are seeing today, they're not disc shaped, they're actually triangular. And of course, the triangular, the delta shape,
which are the same as our spy ships, the stealth bombers and
Auroras. Aerodynamically, it's a much more stable shape.
Well, one of the points to me is not necessarily our own black technology, it's that of other countries. You know, I mean, there are a lot of other countries out there than just the US and Great Britain, and they may have their own ex-Nazis after the Second World War, like, you know, Russia, for instance. And maybe Russian pilots did come over here and did try to put the frighteners up us, or were spying on us with their own stealth technology. Like,
well,
especially if the government is saying we don't know what it is.
Put it this way, the MOD's entire UFO project has its roots in concerns about foreign military aircraft penetrating our air defences, and you can find a statement to that effect on the MOD website. So that's no great secret.
What is the most interesting UFO case and most compelling for you?
It's got to be the Rendlesham Forest incident. To have a case where there's an audit trail of verifiable documentation, including a Defence Intelligence staff assessment of radiation levels taken at the landing site.
Really? So we actually have a physical piece of evidence?
We have a physical evidence. The UFO was seen to land. Indentations were seen.
So this started out with 3 lights, was it, in the woods?
This started out with lights in the woods in the early hours of 26th of December 1980. Some United States Air Force security personnel went out to investigate. They saw a landed UFO, sort of triangular shape, but on 3 legs, some sort of tripod-like device.
Is this kind of a cone shape?
Yeah, pretty much. Strange symbols on the side that were likened to Egyptian hieroglyphs when we got close enough to touch the side of it.
Are these the drawings that we see on your website?
Yes, they are.
So have you ever had actually any language experts take it?
No, again, this is another thing that should have been done and wasn't. But, you know, the challenge is there, it's in the public domain. You know, they took a Geiger counter the following day and took radiation readings. They peeked in the 3 holes, and the Defence Intelligence staff said that the levels seemed, quote, significantly higher than background, unquote. The following night, the UFO came back, and witnesses included the Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, probably the highest ranking military officer to have reported a UFO whilst on duty. He saw it together with about half a dozen witnesses. The UFO seemed to interfere with their radio comms. It seemed to interfere with the powerful mobile light generators that they brought out there, called light alls. Colonel Holt saw the UFO at the end of the encounter. I mean, it was firing light beams down at a position in the forest where he and his men were. Later on, it was over the base at Woodbridge, these Bentwaters and Woodbridge, two of the most sensitive bases in the country, in Suffolk, South East England. He saw it firing light beams down at arguably the most sensitive part of the military establishment.
That's kind of disturbing on several levels.
It's extremely disturbing. I mean, it was a clear security breach. People say world's most famous UFO incident, Roswell. World's most significant UFO incident, not least because it's comparatively recent and all the witnesses are still alive and talking about it. Actually, Rendlesham. There's no getting away from the fact that there are a huge number of complete liars and fantasists in the UFO field who are after some sort of combination of self-gratification, money, ego.
What I would really like to do at this point, we've got to look for what is the truth. And this is what I keep saying to people that come to me, the ufologists. And, I don't care about your belief system. I'm not interested. I want truth. What is the truth at the end of all this? Let's just clear all the crap away. Let's stop the lying. Let's stop the ego. Let's stop all these other things. Stand back. Be completely neutral. I would love, yes, there to be aliens. And I don't disbelieve that aliens have visited this planet. But I don't necessarily believe that they have either. I just have not found evidence.
Yeah. And
so I will search and try to find the truth. It doesn't matter to me either way.
Well,
and the difficulty is to this religion that we seem to have built up of ufology. It now matters to a great many people, and it matters too much, and so that can blind the truth.
And you're right. There is huge competition between the researchers. Everyone wants to be, I don't know, the person that gets on the TV show or gets the book deal. Now there's nothing fundamentally incompatible about that and being a good researcher. I mean, plenty of good good researchers write good books, and why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
You know, part of writing a book is actually getting the data out to the wider public. Part of it is paying bills to put food on the table and put your kids through education. Nothing wrong with that. There's, you know, it annoys me sometimes when people say, "Oh well, you know, he's just said that because he's selling a book." Well,
Yes.
you know, should we dismiss Stephen Hawking's scientific research simply because he's written a couple of books about it? I mean, no, that's clearly nonsense. That doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of ego and competition and charlatans and things in the field. I mean, ultimately, I think it comes back to government. It's government that's got to take a grip and the lead on this. I mean, look at, I don't know, a paranormal research group maybe doing some work into remote viewing. Now go on to the MOD website, mod.uk, type the phrase remote viewing in. You'll find a 168 page report, formerly classified secret UK eyes only, now declassified of course, detailing how the MOD tried to recruit psychics in the aftermath of 9/11, fairly obviously to go after Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and WMD and any other targets of interest. And although actually the methodology was flawed, it's a head and shoulders above, you know, the sort of, I don't know,
independent.
The sort of the Sheffield South kind of paranormal research group, whatever. You know, sorry Sheffield, nothing against.
It's a lovely place. Yes, no, I totally agree with that. I'm surprised actually to hear that psychic research such as that was actually going on so late.
Well, the tragedy of it was that they didn't. This is the tragedy of many highly classified studies. The tragedy is that the combination of the high classification and the sensitivity and the need to keep it to as small a number of people as possible limits the extent that you can go out and engage with the experts and the stakeholders. So really, the Defence Intelligence staff, when they were looking at this, should have got fully alongside the people that were involved in Stargate and Sunstreak and Grill Flame and all those US projects that were looking at this, for goodness sake, since the since Puthoff and Targ were doing it at SRI in the 70s, and they should have gone alongside. I mean, when I spoke to Hal Puthoff about this, and when I showed him the MOD study, he was horrified that they'd missed this opportunity. I mean, if you're going to do it, I mean, they put a lot of work into it, right down to hiring commercial premises so that they could pretend this wasn't a government program. You know, so it was a sophisticated effort, but in terms of what they did, it was mishandled. The same was true on Project Condign, the highly classified UFO study that the Defence Intelligence staff commissioned in the mid-90s. Again, there 450 pages of very detailed documentation, at the time classified secret UK eyes only, but you know, so many failures to engage with the proper experts and stakeholders.